Hey, this is Trav here, and this podcast relies on the good people who help support this podcast on Patreon, and I'd like to give a big thank you to Bill, Bree, Brendan, Grant, Lisa, Mog, Dan, and Paula. Thank you so much, and here's the show. Hey, welcome to episode 171 of Tales from the Mind Boat, the slow-moving boat ride inside the vast, open imagination of the maze that is my mind. This is Trav Nash speaking, and thank you very much for listening to this episode. It really does mean a lot to me, and I deeply appreciate it. And today's episode is all about escaping, and how I used to be quite an expert at it, and living more in my head than in the real world. So it's a good show, and all you need to do is sit back, relax, think about the cold winter months as we set sail. I am an expert at disappearing, and when I say this I don't mean some kind of extravagant magic act where the lights go out and vanish into an evaporating smoke. I mean I am an expert at checking out, leaving whatever I am doing and being lost in this vast maze that is my mind. Sometimes I could so easily slip away that I start to panic that maybe I won't find my way back again, or perhaps someone has noticed I am no longer paying attention and wants me to come back. And sometimes I'm reluctant to this because there's a secret side of me that wants to stay inside my thoughts and my well-tuned imagination. It's this trick that I've perfected over a long time of being somewhere I don't really feel comfortable and being a part of. As far back as I can recall, I just remember being taken to nursing homes of slowly fading away aunties who sit by the window looking out at a garden that no longer seems to be tended to. My need to be stimulated and keep my mind active was unquenchable, so I quickly learned to look internally and wipe it all away and see that vast world inside of myself that I could create and rule over. This technique only got more and more easier when I went to school and found the classroom incredibly boring and spent so much time inside my head that I almost have no memory of ever doing any work or learning anything. I must have learned something, but I can't recall ever being told I was good at anything. I just faded away until the bell rang, and sometimes resisted ever coming back again. I began to write these narratives in my head, an alternative life where I wasn't burdened with doubt and anxiousness. I pulled in famous celebrities into my stratosphere, and in this world would all get along, and they would find me interesting and charming. It wouldn't have preset notions of the fact that I was dull or stupid or possibly boring. Over those years I had my own soap opera in my head that sort of began to write itself and became more and more involved. It started to grow plot lines and drama that I needed more time to orchestrate. This need to escape reality and control a world when I could always swing things to my favour. For in reality, I had very little control. I was boxed in and reminded of all the things I couldn't do, more than the things I could. My life seemed already laid out for me, and I couldn't think of anything worse than what the future had in store. In some ways, I could see an alternative because I constructed it in my daydreams. Although I made a world inside my head, it was still grounded in some kind of reality. Even my sense of self-worth back then never thought I deserved anything good. And even in my head, the same principles applied. All I really wanted was the people to like me, even though I'm obviously flawed. The more involved I was in my daydream, the less likely I found myself wanting to participate or interacting with others. If I ever was invited to someone's house or birthday party, I always went with suspicion, as I was the kid that you'd possibly invite out of some kind of sympathy for the fact that I lacked any social skills or any natural confidence. In primary school, the teachers grouped different children together to one table each, with 10 or so other boys. And through this randomly selected process, this became my core friendship. But even still, I began to feel a distinct, unspoken ranking or status emerge. Friendships were clearly more stronger than others, and I felt every day that I was barely hanging in there. Sometimes I would open my mouth to join in a conversation, and found what I said was complete gibberish, or a distinct lack of comprehension of what they were talking about. And I found myself sliding further and further down the flagpole of popularity. It was around this point that the world inside my head and the constraints of my reality began to blur. I found myself needing that validation, and climbed back up that status of the group that I felt I was lacking. And I was unintentionally lying or elaborating on situations that was never as exciting as I led people to believe. I began to do this so often that I found myself caught in the web of my own made universe. I was constantly being called out, but could never back down. I thought I was too clever and could invent any explanation for any of my inconsistencies that would make it harder and harder to get out of. And I lied about really stupid things, like I stayed up and watched Masters of the Universe when it was shown on free-to-air TV, and when questioned about the movie, it was quite obvious I never saw it, as the cartoon and the movie were wildly different. My parents maintained these heavy restrictions on where I could go and what I could watch on TV, and when I had to go to bed, and I resented this fact that to me sounded much stricter than the more laid-back, easygoing parents of my friends. I was falling behind of whatever was popular and couldn't join in the conversations about this new movie called Terminator 2 or Michael Jordan basketball cards and shoes. At some point I stopped trying and changed my attitude to I don't follow popular trends. And this was mainly because my parents never subscribed to it either. No matter how much I begged for Reebok pumps, they would still buy me the same brown boring leather shoes. And in some ways, I think I was better off for it in the long run. But at the time, I considered this a crime against humanity. I would have shouted child abuse if I knew what it was at the time. The only way I could live out the good life of those kinds of parents who can afford to buy their kids the latest fashion accessories was to play it in my head, swap out my parents with some cool TV couple, so my dad became Stephen Keaton from The Family Ties, and my mum was Kate Tanner from Alf. They were the kind of cool parents who let me do what I want and bought me anything I asked for. And for a small fraction of a moment, I felt kind of happy, but knew this was all make-believe, no matter how much I wished it wasn't. High school was what I would describe as the crossing of the streams. I began to stop living in that soap opera of the mind and was trying to make an effort to find out who I was, and began to feel my influences creep in, and tried on people's personalities like hats to see how I looked with each one. The disappearing act, where I would slink away in my head, started to become a way out of awkward situations, more than a fantasy I was dwelling in. I could fade away and transport myself into thoughts and overanalyzing moments to the point of obsession, where I would think of a myriad of ways I could have made myself sound cooler, or at the very least know what I'm talking about. The need for validation was all that mattered, to be noticed, especially by girls, and have something unique to say that others failed to see. Through watching stand-up comedy, I found this connection of using humour to deflect the fact that you don't know everything, and how it can make the most average person much more likeable and define you as a person. You could possibly be that funny guy who says funny things. I spent a lot of time listening to comedy albums and watched specials when I could. I had no intentions of being a comedian myself, and I hated public speaking, but I started a joke club that only had one other member. We would walk around the Oval reciting Jim Carrey bits from Living Colour, or The Simpsons quotes from the golden age of the first few seasons. The humour I developed was abstract and weird, and not everyone got it, and that kind of made it feel special and unique, and a secret that was only ours. It was something I felt represented me, and making others laugh felt good and somehow masked the awkward lack of social skills I clearly had. I've always felt that people never liked me for stupid things possibly I've said, or most of the time it was just out of nowhere, for something I've never even done. based purely on the fact I was this tall, awkward, skinny looking guy who was growing a little bit too confident, and maybe they were threatened by this. I found that humour could get me out of any of these confrontations. I had no interest in fighting or wasting my time with anyone who just seemed so quick to react to violence, but I found that self-deprecating humour was the equivalent of punching myself in the face for them. Whenever there was a need to humiliate myself, I felt like I could do it better, and there was some kind of respect acquired by doing this. I recalled seeing Steve Martin in the movie Roxanne, where he came up with 20 better insults about his comically large nose than some hick at the bar, and I could see the value in it. It was a skill I found that came naturally, and I could read someone's sense of humour, and I could try to appeal to that level, although this was always hit and miss and a learning experience. In my teens, I didn't know who I was, but I had to develop an almost impenetrable armour that I could help shake off the insults and hate that I seemed to accumulate. As long as I looked like nothing could hurt me, I could disguise my weaknesses and flaws, at least until I could go home again and fall into a deep depression, when no one was around to see how much it really hurt me. Unintentionally, all those comedy specials and sitcoms I watched was research for spending my 20s performing stand-up comedy, which opened a door to a life that extended beyond the life I constructed in my head when I was young. Suddenly real life became stranger than reality. It was more stranger than I could ever imagine, and the experiences I endured were the kind of moments you couldn't make up. Growing up embellishing half-truths and lies was soon left behind as I became a bona fide weirdo magnet, because it took one to know one. I became fascinated with obscure conversations of strangers. I encouraged conversations with people who seemed a little off-kilter and had that vibe, and I wanted to know what their story was, where they came from, and how they got to this moment that we were both sharing at that point in time. The stories started to all have a similar thread and theme. They all began with a feeling of isolation and being different from the norm, and over time they embraced their weirdness and relished in this newfound freedom. Looking back now, I don't think I'll ever put myself in possible dangerous situations like that again. I couldn't imagine even considering doing it these days, as I've retreated too far back away from society as I've got older. But back then there was a need to reach out to the damaged and broken. I needed to be reminded that feelings I felt growing up was shared by the majority of most people, and everyone had a kind of mask to protect them in some way or another. Learning this may seem pretty damn obvious, but at the time, it was a revelation. A hammer to the skull, bright fireworks, neon lights that lit those dark corridors that I've been cautiously walking down trying not to trip myself up. There was a small window when I felt free and confident. I reached some kind of peak version of myself and found that my personality no longer repelled people but attracted them. It was something that took getting used to, as I take any kind of kindness with a small pinch of suspicion, like it was all set up to expose how obviously inept I am. Things just seemed to make sense at the time. I took things as they come, and I felt needed and wanted for the first time in my life, a true sense of belonging. And in the immortal words of Trent Reznor, nothing could stop me now. As you get older, your values change. Your pursuit to maintain a stable foundation of happiness begins to feel futile and unrealistic. You learn quickly that you have to learn how to balance all the accumulated weight from all those years that you've been living. Each year it becomes heavier, and the possibility of slipping off those polished surfaces becomes a likely possibility the longer you stick around. My intensity over the years has died down, and that need for validation is almost depleted. The world inside my head is now a vacant lot that is now for lease. The skills I learned from a lifetime of anxiousness helps me try to calm down the alarms in my head that try and convince me that monsters walk the earth and there's danger creeping in at all hours. I struggle to maintain a sense of clarity, to access what is real, what is the right now. This moment I want to hold on to, as it feels like it's slipping away too fast for my liking. My life is a flipbook of images that are leading to an eventual conclusion, but in the meantime I think about trying to become a better version of myself. I used to think you grow up to be an adult, and that is about as good as it gets, and then you slowly slide back down into old age. But while I still have my thoughts and some kind of anchor that keeps me from floating too far away inside my head, I want to try and change not only myself, but maybe those around me who might have gone through a similar struggle. It's okay to mess up, to not be the greatest human that ever walked the earth. It's okay to fail at something. It's okay to love or be loved regardless of the fact you don't measure up to those teeth-whitening commercials on TV, where couples are dressed in all white, walking hand in hand through blue skies and pristine beaches. If you've made it through that awkward stage of your life, where you're trying to figure out whom and what you are about, and come out the other side, you owe it to the world to help others find a way through the dark fog too. Few people can do this on their own, and sometimes you need to let people in and admit that you need that help. I wasted so much time trying to insulate myself and try and hide the fact that I'm not doing as well as I should be, but you can't hide the hurt from others. Most people can tune into that frequency, and hopefully there is someone out there who can offer a hand to pull you out and give you that extra life. A life of being on the run and escaping every moment is no way to live. It's a skill that I think did more damage to my head than good, and I have to really focus to try and keep myself in the present and not slip away when the alarms go off inside of me. It's important to be in the here and now. There is too much going on to ignore, and it's time to put all those life skills to good use when the right time comes. So that's it for another week. Thank you very much for listening to this episode. It really does mean a lot to me. If you like this episode, then please like and subscribe on the very device you're using right now to listen to this podcast. Doing so really helps me out. Just tweeting this out if you see this to people you know, or maybe just telling them to their face, recommending it would be most awesome, and I would deeply appreciate it. You can follow the podcast on Twitter and Facebook just by searching for Tales from the Mind Boat. The music for this podcast is composed by Tim Witt. You can listen to his music right now on SoundCloud just by searching for Tim Witt Sounds, and you can also pick up his albums at Bandcamp also by searching for Tim Witt Sounds. You can follow me on Twitter at Nashtopia, or you can see my art diary on Instagram at Trav Nash Draws Things. So that's it for another week. My computer has crashed 3 times trying to do this recording, so hopefully it sounds okay, and I'm just trying to keep this short because I don't want it to crash again. So I don't have much else to offer until next week. Hopefully things will be running a bit more smoothly. Take care of yourself, have a good week, and as always, peace.